Your life at every level of savings. There is one number that determines almost everything about how you experience modern life. Not your salary, not your credit score, not your income, your job title, your degree, your industry, or the city you live in. Your savings number. The amount of money sitting in your accounts that isn't allocated to anything, that doesn't have a bill attached to it, that isn't the next rent check or the next car payment or the balance you're managing down on a credit card. The money that is simply there, available, liquid, yours, without a predetermined destination. Most people don't know their exact savings number. This is not an accident. There is something psychologically protective about not confronting the gap between what you have and what the standard advice says you should have. The gap is uncomfortable. The number is real. Not knowing it keeps both of those things at a manageable distance. But the number shapes everything. It shapes how you sleep, whether you answer the phone when you don't recognize the number, how you feel on Sunday nights, whether you say yes to things or no to things. How much of your mental energy goes toward managing risk versus building anything? Whether an unexpected bill is an inconvenience or a catastrophe. Whether your identity is organized around getting through the month or getting somewhere specific. This is your life at every level of savings. Not the savings account commercials, not the personal finance content that tells you just cut your coffee without acknowledging the structural reality of what it actually takes to build a buffer in a world that keeps getting more expensive. The real version, the level-by-level truth about what money in the account and the absence of it actually does to a life. If you've never seen a breakdown like this before, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. We cover the real mechanics of money, psychology, and financial life at every income level. Like this video, it costs you nothing, and it helps more people find this content. Now let's get into it. Level 1. $0 in savings. The most common number in the country. You have $0 in savings, and this fact lives in your body the way a low-grade infection does. Not acutely, you're not in crisis. You're working, you're paying your bills, you're eating, you're maintaining the surface-level appearance of a financially functional adult. But there is a constant low-frequency hum of financial anxiety that runs beneath everything. A background process that never fully closes, that colors every decision with a layer of threat assessment that people with savings don't have to perform. According to the Federal Reserve, roughly 37% of American adults could not cover an unexpected $400 expense without borrowing money or selling something. Not 37% of poor people, 37% of adults across the income spectrum. The savings crisis is not a crisis of the bottom. It's a crisis of almost everyone. You make $52,000 a year. By most standards, this is a livable wage. By the standards of your specific city, your specific rent, your specific debt load, and your specific set of monthly obligations, it is a wage that covers everything and saves nothing. The math is almost, but not quite, sufficient. The distance between almost sufficient and actually sufficient turns out to be the most expensive gap there is. What zero savings actually does to your daily experience. Every unexpected cost hits like a minor emergency. The car needs tires, the dentist finds something, the phone breaks. Each of these events, routine, predictable in aggregate, genuinely unavoidable over the course of a year, triggers a problem-solving session that costs you energy, time, and usually money in the form of interest. The credit card absorbs the $400 tire cost. The minimum payment on that $400 stretched over time costs you $480. The emergency was $400. The fee for not having savings was $80 more. You experience this cycle so many times that it begins to feel like just how life works. A series of financial mini-emergencies that you navigate, resolve, and pay extra for. The extra cost of being broke. The overdraft fees, the interest, the late fees when the timing is slightly off, is estimated by researchers to run between $2,000 and $3,000 a year for a typical low-savings household. That is money that could build savings. That is money that instead goes to the financial system as a tax on not having a buffer. The emotional texture of zero savings is something that's difficult to describe to someone who hasn't lived inside it. It's not despair, it's vigilance, a kind of exhausting alertness that never fully relaxes because relaxing feels dangerous. The good news, the genuinely true good news, is that zero is not a permanent condition. It is a starting point, and the distance from zero to the first real level of safety is shorter than it feels from inside it. Level 2. $500 to $2,000. The starter buffer. Smaller than you think, more important than it sounds. You saved $1,000. This took 8 months of intentional effort. You used the cash back from your credit card for 3 months instead of spending it. You sold 2 things on Facebook Marketplace that had been sitting in your closet. You said no to 4 social invitations that would have cost money. You made the account separate, a different bank, no debit card, specifically so that the money felt harder to touch. And now it's there. $1,000, not invested, not growing, just sitting in a savings account earning 4.6% at an online bank because you read something about high-yield accounts and moved it. $1,000 is not financial security. You know this. If you lost your job tomorrow, $1,000 is approximately 9 days of expenses. It does not protect you from anything systemic or serious. What it protects you from is the specific category of small, random, inevitable financial emergencies that have been landing on your credit card for the last 4 years. The tire situation, the copay situation, the "I calculated wrong and overdrafted" situation. These situations now have a resolution that doesn't cost extra. You pay from the buffer. The buffer drops, you rebuild it. The credit card does not get involved. The $35 overdraft fee does not happen. The $80 interest does not accumulate. The $1,000 is doing real, measurable work, even though it looks like it's just sitting there. What surprises people at this level is the psychological effect relative to the size of the number. Something genuinely shifts. Not dramatically. You're not sleeping differently. You're not making different decisions at the grocery store. But there is a reduction in the specific anxiety attached to the question, what if something happens? The answer used to be, I don't know. Now the answer is, I handle it from the buffer and rebuild. That's a different answer. That different answer changes the background hum. You have begun. That's the whole significance of this level, not the $1,000. The beginning. Level 3. $5,000 to $10,000. 1 month of real breathing room. Getting from $1,000 to $5,000 takes longer than getting from $0 to $1,000, even though the distance is 4 times larger, for reasons that feel unfair but make sense. At $1,000, you had a specific goal with a visible finish line. At $1,000, the next goal is more abstract. The finish line is further. The motivation is harder to sustain without a concrete near-term target. But you got there. Probably not in a straight line. There were months where the buffer went backward, where something happened that required drawing it down, where you looked at the number and it was $2,200 instead of $4,500, and the progress felt temporary. You rebuilt it each time. This is the actual shape of building savings, not a smooth ascending line, but a jagged, interrupted, sometimes discouraging climb that trends upward over years, not months. $7,500 in savings. This is enough to cover approximately 1 month of your full expenses: rent, food, car, insurance, utilities, all of it, for 30 days without a single paycheck. What 1 month of runway feels like is different than what $1,000 feels like. The question, what if I lost my job tomorrow, now has a longer answer. It has a measured, specific answer. You have 30 days. 30 days to figure something out, to apply places, to make decisions about what comes next, without the immediate pressure of next week's rent. 30 days is not a lot of time, but it is real time. Time with savings is fundamentally different from time without it. At this level, something else begins to happen. You start to have opinions about money that you didn't have before. You have a high-yield savings account now, and you're actively managing it, watching the rate, comparing alternatives, reading about whether you should put some of this into a CD for a slightly better return. You have developed a financial practice. Small, but real. You check your accounts the way you check your phone, not obsessively, but regularly, as part of how you move through the week. People around you don't know any of this is happening. You look the same, but you are different. Level 4, $15,000 to $25,000. The fully funded emergency fund, the baseline the experts talk about. Every personal finance writer, every financial advisor, every responsible voice in the money conversation says the same thing. 3 to 6 months of expenses and liquid savings is the foundation. Build this first, before investing, before extra debt payments, before anything else. You've built it. Your monthly expenses are $4,100. You have $20,500 in a high-yield savings account, which is almost exactly 5 months of expenses. This took you 3.5 years from your first intentional $50 transfer to reach. It did not happen quickly. It happened persistently, which turns out to be the only way it happens. The fully funded emergency fund is a different psychological object than anything at lower levels. At $500, you had protection from small emergencies. At $5,000, you had 1 month of runway. At $20,000, you have the ability to survive a real crisis. Job loss, major health event, divorce, a landlord who decides to sell, a car that is totaled by someone without insurance. The genuinely bad scenarios that most people cannot financially survive without taking on catastrophic debt. You can survive them. Not comfortably, not without pain, but without the cliff edge. The thing about this level that personal finance content often undersells is how much of your mental health it purchases. The specific anxiety of what happens if something serious goes wrong. The 2 a.m. version of that question, the version that wakes you up, largely resolves at this level. Not because nothing serious will ever go wrong, but because you have an actual, concrete, specific plan for what happens if it does. You pay your expenses from this fund. You look for work. You have 5 months to find something. 5 months is enough. You know it's enough. And knowing it is enough changes how you move through every day that is not a crisis. What happens next is interesting. You now have permission to think beyond emergencies. For the first time in your financial life, the question stops being, how do I protect against disaster, and starts being, what do I build toward? This is a new kind of question. Most people have never had the mental space to ask it in earnest. Level 5. $50,000. The Opportunity Fund, where savings becomes something else. The jump from $25,000 to $50,000 takes longer than every previous jump. Not because you're doing anything wrong, because the mechanics change. At lower savings levels, you're building a buffer against the world. At $50,000, the buffer is built. What you're doing now is accumulating capital. Money that doesn't have a defensive purpose. Money that is looking for a productive one. And the transition from defensive saving to intentional accumulation requires a different mindset that most people never explicitly develop because nobody teaches you when to make the switch. Your $50,000 in savings is not all in one account anymore. It's split. $20,000 stays in the high-yield savings account as your emergency fund. untouched and intended to stay that way. The other $30,000 is in a brokerage account, invested in low-cost index funds, because at some point in the last 2 years, you understood that $30,000 sitting in a savings account earning 4.6% is worse math than $30,000 in the market over a long time horizon. You made peace with the volatility. You watched the balance go down 12% in 1 quarter and didn't sell anything. What $50,000 in total savings provides is something that doesn't have a technical name, but that people who've had it describe the same way. Optionality. You could take a career risk, not leave your job without a plan, but take a job that pays less for a year because the opportunity is worth the short-term cost. You could do that. You have the math to support it. You could pursue something expensive and uncertain, a certification, a move to a better city, a side project that needs startup costs. These things are now possible in a concrete sense, not just in the someday sense. You could survive a health event that costs you several months of income without the financial recovery lasting longer than the medical one. Optionality is what separates people who can respond to life's opportunities from people who can only react to life's emergencies. Most people spend their 20s and much of their 30s entirely in the reactive category, not because they lack discipline, because they didn't have the capital to play offense. At $50,000, you have crossed the line, level 6, $100,000. The 6-figure savings milestone, psychological and mathematical. The first time the account balance hits $100,000, you stare at it for a moment. Not because you didn't know it was coming. You've been watching the number climb for years, checking it on a schedule that has become almost ritualistic, but because the number looks different than any previous milestone. 6 figures. A comma in a place that money in your family never historically had a comma. You are 39. It took you 12 years from your first intentional savings effort to reach this number, which is longer than the personal finance optimists suggest and shorter than most people believe is possible. It happened through consistent behavior in the years when the amounts were embarrassingly small. It happened through the compounding effect that you intellectually understood for years before you viscerally felt it. It happened through not stopping. The mathematical reality of $100,000 in savings and investments. If you never added another dollar, if you froze your contributions today and let the account sit for 25 more years at the historical average market return, it would grow to approximately $1 million. You could stop saving entirely, and the money you've already saved would make you a millionaire by the time you're 64. You won't stop saving. But understanding this changes something. The money is doing real work now. The growth each year, $7,000 to $10,000 in a good year, is comparable to months of active saving. The portfolio is generating an amount that would have felt significant when you were starting, without any additional labor. At $100,000, the savings account itself becomes a presence in your financial life in a way that changes how you think about earned income. Your paycheck is no longer the only variable. There are 2 things growing simultaneously: your savings from your work and your savings from the money's work. Over time, the second number will exceed the first. You understand this now not as a concept, but as a lived reality you can feel in the numbers each quarter. Level 7, $250,000. The territory where the language changes. You no longer call it a savings account. $250,000 spread across a high-yield savings emergency fund, a taxable brokerage account, a maxed 401k, and a Roth IRA doesn't fit neatly into the category of savings anymore. It is a portfolio. It has allocation. It has rebalancing. It has tax considerations and time horizons, and a structure that you've thought through carefully enough to explain to someone else. You are 43. Your financial advisor, not a product salesperson, an actual fee-only fiduciary advisor you pay $2,400 a year for 4 90-minute meetings, uses the phrase wealth management when she refers to what you're doing. You used to think that phrase was for other people, people with different last names, people who came from money. Now it refers to you, and the adjustment is stranger than you expected. What $250,000 in savings and investments does to the texture of daily life. The financial stress that was the background of your 20s and early 30s is largely gone. Not gone as in resolved by ignoring it, gone as in genuinely resolved. The emergency is funded. The retirement is on track. The investments are working. The structure is solid. When something goes wrong, and things still go wrong because life goes wrong regardless of how much money you have, it lands differently. With absorption instead of crisis. With options instead of panic. You are not rich. This is worth saying clearly. $250,000 at 43 in a country where a house costs $400,000, and healthcare is what it is, and retirement requires north of $1 million to sustain a middle-class lifestyle, is not rich. It is, by the numbers, ahead of the median American household at your age, which has a net worth of approximately $135,000. But ahead of median and comfortable are different things. What you have is this. Proof. Undeniable, account statement verified, 43 years of life of evidence proof that the compounding works, that the consistency works, that the boring, disciplined, unsexy approach that every legitimate financial professional recommends actually produces results over sufficient time horizons. You know something now that you couldn't know at the beginning. The numbers are not lying. Level 8. $500,000. The halfway point nobody told you was a halfway point. You've been doing the retirement math for years, on and off, with varying levels of precision and varying levels of anxiety about what the precision reveals. The consensus number, what you need saved to sustain your current lifestyle in retirement without working, is somewhere between $1.2 and $1.6 million, depending on your current lifestyle. $0.6 million, depending on your assumptions about withdrawal rates, inflation, Social Security, and the unknowable variables of health and longevity. You are halfway there. $500,000 is not retirement. It is not financial independence. It is not the finish line. But it is incontrovertible evidence that the finish line is reachable within your lifetime at your current trajectory. Which sounds obvious and isn't. Most Americans reach their 60s having never achieved certainty about whether retirement is actually possible for them. You have achieved that certainty in your mid-40s. The destination is confirmed. The arrival date is calculable. What $500,000 in savings does to how you carry yourself is subtle and hard to fully articulate, but real enough that people notice it without knowing what they're seeing. You are less anxious, not calm in a medicated way, in a grounded way, in a I understand my situation and my situation is manageable way. You take fewer things personally at work because your livelihood, while still dependent on employment, is no longer entirely contingent on the approval of whoever currently employs you. You make decisions more slowly and with more confidence, because you've learned over years that slow, confident decisions produce better outcomes than fast, anxious ones. You say no more often because you can. One thing that happens at this level that surprises most people, you become less interested in talking about money, not more. People who are anxious about money think about it constantly and often bring it up. The rent, the bills, the cost of everything. People who have solved the foundational money problems tend to become quieter about it. Not secretive, just calm. The thing that was loud has been turned down. You still read the accounts, you still manage the portfolio, you still make intentional decisions. But money has receded from the foreground of your internal life and settled into the background, where it belongs. Level 9. $1 million. The number that changes nothing and everything. It happens on a Wednesday. You're not watching for it particularly. You check the accounts on Sunday mornings with coffee. And Monday, you noticed it was $987,000 and thought, soon. And then Wednesday happened to be a good market day, and you opened the app at lunch, and the number had crossed. $1 million. You sit with that for a minute. You take a screenshot. You text your spouse. You put your phone back in your pocket and go back to work. Nothing about Wednesday afternoon is different from Tuesday afternoon. The meeting you have at 2 p.m. is the same meeting you would have had regardless of the number in your account. The commute home is the same commute. The dinner is the same dinner. The house is the same house. And yet, a millionaire is, statistically, a meaningful minority of the American population. Depending on how you measure it, investable assets versus total net worth, somewhere between 7% and 12% of households have crossed this line. You are now in that group. Not the ultra-wealthy group, not the group that makes the news, but the group that has, through years of deliberate behavior, built a financial foundation that genuinely changes what is possible for the rest of your life. What $1 million in savings and investments actually changes. The retirement math resolves. At $1 million, the 4% rule, the widely cited guideline for sustainable annual withdrawal from a retirement portfolio, suggests you can withdraw $40,000 a year indefinitely. $40,000 a year doesn't support an extravagant lifestyle, but combined with Social Security and any pension income, it is retirement. It is genuinely, actually, stop working if you want to retirement. You probably won't stop working, not immediately. The number is there, but the habit of working, the identity that's wrapped up in career, the relationships and structure and sense of purpose, these don't evaporate because an account crossed 7 figures. Most people with $1 million in savings continue working for years after the number makes it optional. Because optional is different from unnecessary. And because the life you've built around employment doesn't dissolve just because the financial requirement does. But optional is everything. When you go to work tomorrow, you'll go because you're choosing to. The same building, the same desk, the same people, the same work. But a door in your mind that has been locked since you started your first job has just swung open. You can leave whenever you want to. That changes the experience of staying. Level 10, $2 million to $5 million. Beyond the number, where savings becomes legacy. The compounding has taken over. At $3 million, the portfolio generates somewhere between $150,000 and $300,000 in annual growth in a normal market year. This is more than most American households earn in active income. You are generating, through the simple mechanism of previously accumulated capital compounding on itself, more money than most working families bring home. And unlike earned income, this doesn't require your presence, your health, your continued employment, or your ongoing effort. You are 57. Your savings journey started in your mid-20s, with $50 a month transferred to an account you barely looked at. It proceeded through 30 years of consistent behavior, boring decisions, staying invested when the market dropped, not buying things you couldn't afford, not lifestyle inflating as fast as your income grew. It is the least cinematic wealth story imaginable. There is no moment where it all clicked, no pivot point, no genius investment, no lucky break that the math required. There is just time and consistency, and the arithmetic of compound interest doing exactly what every compound interest chart in every personal finance book said it would do, if you gave it long enough. What life looks like at $3 million in savings is, on the surface, unremarkable. You live in a nice house. You take good vacations. You drive a car you like. You eat well. These things are true of many people who have significantly less than $3 million. And they were true of you at $300,000. The visible trappings of your financial life have not kept pace with the number because you never needed them to, and because you learned long ago that spending on things for the signal they send is one of the least satisfying ways to deploy capital. What has changed is the invisible stuff. Your children will inherit something real. Not life-changing in the lottery ticket sense, but genuinely meaningful. A foundation that gives them the same buffer you spent your 30s building for yourself. The ability to take a risk, survive a setback, make a choice based on what they want rather than what the next paycheck requires. You can give money away in amounts that matter, not as a gesture, as a force. The local school that needs equipment, the nephew who needs tuition help, the friend whose health situation became a financial situation and who won't ask for help because they're proud. These are people you can actually help now in concrete, lasting ways, and the ability to do that turns out to be one of the most deeply satisfying uses of saved money you've encountered. You think sometimes about the person you were at $0. The 24-year-old with $340 in a checking account and the low-grade financial anxiety that never turned off. You think about what you'd tell that person if you could. You wouldn't say, invest in index funds, or build an emergency fund, or any of the correct but insufficient prescriptions that fill personal finance content. You'd say something simpler and harder. The number feels impossible from where you're standing. And it isn't. The mechanism feels too slow to be real. And it is. The version of this that feels like a fantasy from zero is exactly as real as you are at $3 million. The only difference between you at 24 and you at 57 is time, and the decision made once to start. Everything else, every account, every balance, every comma and zero, and the quiet Wednesday afternoon when the number crossed $1 million, flows from that one decision. Not to become rich, just to begin. Most people will read this or watch this and feel something. A recognition of where they are, a picture of where they're going. Maybe a calculation of how far the gap is and how long it would take to close. Here is the one thing worth carrying out of this. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not closed by a single dramatic decision. It is closed by 1,000 small decisions made consistently over a long time. The savings journey is the least exciting story you'll ever live through, and the most consequential. Every level in this video was reached by somebody who started at zero. The number doesn't have to feel possible today. It just has to get started. If this video helped you see your financial situation differently, subscribe. We make content about the real mechanics of money, savings, and financial life, not the highlight reel, the actual path. Like this video, leave a comment about which level you're currently at, and we'll see you in the next one.